The flow of funds into Cyprus has created opportunities for investors and asset managers alike, but not without risk, as seen by March's EU intervention. Persella Ioannides from Meritkapital joins me now to discuss brokerage services and the European market. Persella, welcome.
Thank you, Nick.
First, introduce us to your business lines and services.
Our main business lines are custody, brokerage, so electronic trading, asset management, and recently we received our prop trading license. We cater mainly to Russian clients, so as such our competition is also big Russian investment firms that are themselves domiciled in Cyprus. Some examples are Renaissance Capital at Crete, broker credit service. This is quite a substantial benefit for us because we face that competition and we thus benchmark versus their services, and because they have quite a substantial share capital base, they are investing very much in their infrastructure and their services. And as you know, it's an industry that is developing very fast technically. So also we ourselves are also developing with them by benchmarking to their standards.
You're based in Cyprus, as you mentioned. How were you affected by the EU and IMF's bailout recently this year?
We took a management decision when we started the company to use Cyprus, non-Cyprus-based custodians. And as such, we were unaffected by the Cyprus EU bailout terms because our clients' funds were protected and were not affected. Moreover, our operations were continued in full and were not affected by the capital controls that were imposed on the banking sector in Cyprus because our clients' funds were abroad. This is also the case for other financial services firms such as FX companies or our Russian counterparts in Cyprus, because they themselves also use global custodians, and thus their operations were not affected.
You've spoken before about glocalisation. Tell us what you mean by this.
Glocalisation is a term that is known globally and is basically combining a global perspective and global standards with a local requirement. If you take the instance of Meritkapital, the way we establish a foothold in a very monopolistic Western capital markets industry is to provide a service offering that combines investment advice, electronic trading, which are front office services, with a prime brokerage service line, which includes settlement and clearing, custody, as you know, financing, margin trading. So, I mean, if you take examples of Western companies such as McDonald's or Starbucks, they tend to have a very standardized menu, but they combine it with a local product offering. So in that effect, Meritkapital also tries to provide a derivative product that is front office and prime brokerage service line, which proved very successful because this is a local and regional requirement for us.
Looking at the global markets, which trade calls look good to you in the medium term?
As you very correctly said, like the equity markets and the commodity markets are experiencing quite a boost, and in my opinion, we're actually living in a very boom and bust economic environment, which is triggered by the actions of the global central banks through their liquidity triggering and their respective monetary easing operations. So following the subprime and the subsequent euro debt crisis, like the global central banks try to boost global economic activity, but perhaps a lot of that economic activity is artificial, which can be evidenced by the sharp rise in the equity markets and the commodities markets. We tend to follow a very conservative approach. So our investments are mainly in fixed income instruments. But we utilize, let's say, fixed income instruments that have a twist to take advantage of the ensuing macroeconomic environment. So, for example, convertible bonds that have, an equity underlying, maybe maybe utilized in this environment where equity markets are performing well, or floating rate bonds if the central banks reverse their monetary policy operations, where, as you know, floating rate bonds basically will benefit from interest rates rising. Generally, right now we keep duration in check for the reasons that you just said.
Finally, what are your thoughts on the ECB's monetary policy, and what advice would you give to Mr. Draghi?
The advice that I would give Mr. Draghi is basically to take more forceful and decisive decisions in his monetary policy operations. And I mean, that is true for most European policymakers, because we all know that the Greek debt crisis basically reached the stage that it did because they were delaying in their monetary policy decisions. They need to be more forceful because, as we all know, Europe is very fragmented both culturally and politically. So there needs to be a unified approach to decision and decision making.
Persella, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.